record. We're here on this penultimate Sunday, if you will, before the Derby. Actually, it's the ultimate Sunday before the Derby.
That's right, it is.
And what we have scheduled for you is a Derby special. But before we get to that, we want to thank the folks at Parting Glass Racing for sponsoring this show. We appreciate that. We hope you check them out at their website at partingglassracing.com. Special guests today. We've got 4 of them for you. In about 10 minutes or so, we're going to be joined by Stephen Crist from the Daily Racing Form. He's going to talk briefly about upcoming additions and changes to Daily Racing Form's web version of Formulator. And then we'll talk the Derby with him. Nick, he has made no bones about it in 2 columns. He pretty much said he had his 1, 2, 3s, although one of them is hurting. And it'd be interesting to hear Steve talk about the obvious contenders or the logical contenders and the hunt for value in this Derby.
Yeah, I know. I read his columns. I'm not so sure it's quite as logical as that, because there's a lot of uncertainty in this Kentucky Derby. You've got several horses coming into the race in either very good or peak form, but they've never raced on dirt or raced significantly well on dirt. So I don't think anybody can logically predict what those horses will do. You can have an opinion, but it may or may not be correct.
And immediately after Steve Crist, we're going to be joined by our good friend Phil Gregoire from RacingFlow.com, the Plod Boys, as they call themselves, Phil and Jake. And if you go to RacingFlow.com, they have there a free PDF with the Racing Flow figures, bias, beaten lengths, and flow for the Derby prep races. And so we're going to give Phil a chance to explain that document to you and talk about how they may see runners coming into the Derby as potential upgrades or downgrades. We're interested in that. I'm always looking for an eliminator, if you will, so we're anxious to hear that. Carrie Photius is going to join us. He's on the road in Pennsylvania, but I know he'll be playing today, and we'll talk to Carrie, give Carrie an opportunity to talk about figures, and also, as usual, he and John Preach will be doing their first Triple Crown seminar. And then we'll wrap up the program around 11 o'clock with Jim Mazur, who is in Canada at this juncture. He had a seminar at Woodbine, and we'll be talking to him before he boards a plane to get back home. We've already had an email. That means, Nick, that somebody actually listens to Virtual Tom on the computer at capitalotb.com, because we've had an email from someone who's got a couple of questions for Jim Mazur. Mr. Nick.
Yes.
Aqueduct, before we talk about it, today is the finale of our live bankroll seminar. We'll be at the Teletheater all afternoon. We have diligently attacked today's race cards. We have a slew of potential win bets and a few exotic plays that we're going to bandy about today. If we get the prices, we'll make the plays. And last week, our runner, slow pace, tough trip. We tossed another 100 last week, Nick, and today we'll get a little bit more money, and we'll see if we can do well for those remaining participants. And remember, if you're in this game, today's the day to be there.
Gotta be there.
Because when it's all over, we'll be divvying up the proceeds. And then next week we'll give you a full rundown of how well we did and why, if you will.
See what's gone. We've done 2 seminars. We've made some weekly bets. That's all out the window now. We're into the playoffs now. We're into the final 2.
Yeah.
And we're going to the mat today. We got 5 turf races at Aqueduct.
Yeah, we got 2 at Churchill.
Going to be no apparent excuses with the weather. So, we've had some email, what are you going to do today? What are you going to do?
That's right.
We're going to be rolling.
Okay. That's so come on down or join us on the internet at capitalotb.com.
Sweaty?
Yeah, it's a little warm in here. Belmont, Nick, what I was going to say is today's the last day at Aqueduct. If there's a pick 6, pick 4, whatever it is, they're going to hand it out. And we make the move to Belmont, which is your favorite time of the year, right? This is a tough time. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, it's you know, the quality of racing should be getting better. You get back to Belmont in the spring, you know, Keeneland is over, Gulfstream, the good part of the meet has long been over. Some of the New York stables have started to filter back. More will be coming back for Belmont. You know, if the weather cooperates, there should be plenty of great turf racing. And, you know, the Belmont spring and summer meet is one of the top 5 race meets of the country, I would say. You know, it should be a lot of fun.
And as Anthony pointed out on his show, they drew the first 3 race cards. So if you're at all interested, as we are, you can download them and start working. There's nothing like a 5-day lead, if you will, on this. A couple of other things, and Nick, you know, I think it's important. Belmont signals spring, and spring signals Saratoga and Del Mar. Del Mar runs opposite Saratoga, and they've been approved a shorter work week, if you will. They're going to lose 28 races, which is going to cost them some shekels, if you will, in handle. You know, I haven't seen whether they made up any of the races they were going to lose by adding them to the race cards of the days that they've scheduled, or what. But you know, to a certain degree, that means at least one day, a Monday, when Premier Racing will only be from Saratoga.
Mm-hmm. And you know, that should help the wagering handle on those Mondays. And you know, in a perfect world, I would say that, you know, a 5-day race meet, 5-day per week race meet at Saratoga would be an ideal thing. You know,
Yep.
perhaps with one more race per day. Either you know, the Monday cards, sometimes the Wednesday cards. You know, they don't quite have the buzz about them as the Friday, Saturday, Sunday cards. And you know, it might also help in the turnaround with some of the horses to you know, get more races in per 6-week meet. You know, it's probably 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Unfortunately, I don't know. You know, the fact is that given the fixed cost to run a racetrack, it's unlikely that we will ever see, or
Right.
at least in the reasonable, foreseeable future, see a 5-day race meet at Saratoga, 5-day per week.
And I'm going to say, I don't know if they think this way, but to me, with Del Mar not running on Mondays, it strikes me that marketing or the racing office ought to come up with some way to have a little bit more intriguing race card on Monday, even if they want to call it some sort of Super Monday, or some sort of incentive for horsemen to run racing, you know, like they did with Route. So maybe that'll happen. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the most recent ruling from Breeders' Cup that purse money is going to be redistributed because Wait a While was found positive for, what is it, penicillin or whatever?
Procaine, I think it
Procaine,
was.
whatever it was. And that while the trainer Todd Pletcher has appealed the suspension, we'll see how that plays out. But it's a long time, Nick, since, do you think we'll ever get a speedy adjudication of these positives? Or speedier?
Do I think it's going to be a long time? How long do you think it will be before you and I can fly?
Okay, well, we'll forget that one. And last but not least, and we will raise this issue with all our guests today. You know, a friend of mine and I, my friend Joe G. You know, we have kind of 2 rules about the Derby and runners. One are feets, as our friend Dick Dutrow calls them. Horse got to have good feet, and fungus. You know, those skin rashes that somehow affect horses. Feet or fungus on as a problem is a big negative for us with the Derby. You know, Quality Road developed a quarter crack that specialist Ian McKinley handled wonderfully well, and he developed another one on a different hoof. So, Nikki, let's talk a little bit about that. I don't know about you, but I'm not a big fan of horses trying 10 furlongs with bad feet.
Well, you know, we've had kind of a trend of that in the last 13, 14 years at the Derby. My earpiece keeps falling out because I don't have it screwed in properly. You know, in 1996, we had Unbridled Song, who
Right.
had a bruised foot, and he had severe foot problems. I think he finished 5th after leading the race into the upper stretch. You know, we had AP Indy in '92 scratched the morning of the race. We had Empire Maker, who many people considered a potential Triple Crown winner, come up with a bruised foot before the '03 Kentucky Derby. He did run well. I forgot. I think he finished 2nd or 3rd. I've forgotten with Peace Rules in a photo the year that Funnyside won. But then last year we had Big Brown, who you know, dusted a pretty weak field despite his foot infirmities. So you know the you know, but you got several that didn't run well or didn't make the race versus one that won. So.
And you get the context. I mean, this looks like a pretty healthy field of reasonably consistent runners.
Well,
and you
there's
don't
no
really
question.
want to you don't really want to have a hole in your armor. A chink in
Well,
your armor.
and again, it depends on, you know, like anything else in horse racing. Assuming that your goal is to step up to the plate and make a wager, it depends on the odds. You know, if Quality Road is 4-1 or 9-2, and you've got doubts about his foot, you know, that's not good.
Right.
If he were 10-1,
And he'll never be 10-1.
and he'll never be 10-1. But you know, so the point of the matter is if you're going to make a wager, you know, odds are the determinant.
Last but not least here, we want to congratulate, give a track back salute to Mark and Mike. They had Ian McKinley on yesterday with a good conversation. We were talking about it before we came on air. We're going to take our first commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be talking with Stephen Christ, the king of the Pick Six from Daily Racing Form. Stay with us. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Amello and Nick Kling. We're joined now by Stephen Christ from the Daily Racing Form. Steve, welcome back to the program.
Hey, guys, how are you?
Terrific. Steve, a couple of things. We're going to talk about two aspects first. First, we want to congratulate you on Formulator web version, and I know that you've got some upgrades and changes in the works, so let's talk briefly about that before we yammer about the upcoming Derby.
Yeah, Formulator is now on the web, as you mentioned. You know, it's a product that a lot of us have loved for a long time, and we're kind of frustrated that more people weren't trying it and using it. And it seemed that a big reason was that people just didn't want to install software on their computer. So by making it a live web-based application, it's a lot easier for people to go, poke around, have a look. You know, trainer statistics, lifetime past performances, ability to manipulate the data. It's a lot of fun. I personally couldn't play the races without it.
Well, Steve, Nick Kling here. I have to agree with you. I would say that Formulator is possibly you know, one of the 2 or 3 greatest inventions from my point of view, particularly for people that are you know, dedicated amateurs, you know, that might play the races during a big race meet or on weekends, you know, and don't spend hours on end, you know, like your Dave Litvin does, cutting and pasting charts and all of that sort of stuff. Basically, almost everything that you could possibly want to know about a horse race and past races is there if you want to look for it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing you mentioned about someone like Dave cutting and pasting charts. I mean, one of the great features is that you can click on a past performance line, and it calls up the full chart of that race. And so often when you're looking at the PPs and trying to judge a horse, and you go, well, who else was in that race, and who else came out of it? What did they do in their next starts? Instead of devoting your life to being a monk and building your own archive, you can just get those answers on the fly. So it's a nice time saver.
Well, the other thing, Steve, that I would mention too is that the advantage of the web version versus the program formulator is now, if you're the kind of person that wants to save information, whether it be trip notes, track bias information, pace figures, other than, say, if you do your own versus Randy Moss's, you can do it now, I think, with a greater degree of confidence, because with the program version, like any other computer application, if you didn't back it up on a timely basis, you could lose that information. Now, you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to get it as long as the Daily Racing Form computers don't stop working.
Right, unless all of our servers blow up, your info should be safe.
Steve, just a couple of things then. You talk about time saver. It strikes me that, and I don't consider myself or anybody in this conversation a dinosaur, but this is really a tool for the handicapper of the future. Because they're much more internet and technology savvy than folks in years past. You talked about folks somewhat being reluctant to access the programmable formulator. So my question to you is, certainly having all that information there saves time in terms of post-race charts and the like and trips and so on. But what is your experience in terms of the learning curve, and how long does it take you to actually get yourself clicking through a card? In other words, if you're going to work on that, let's say just Aqueduct, because there's a pick six there that you're interested in, about how much time does it take you to get the information you want?
Well, everybody's different. I mean, I would say on average to do a card, for me, is about a 2 to 3 hour process.
Okay.
But, honestly, if it's a Friday night and you want to just jump in and play a pick four at Hollywood, I can handicap in 5 minutes a race if I have to.
And I think that's an important point for folks who are contemplating getting through the learning curve, if you will, and manipulating the data. Anyhow, what's coming up? I know that I read that you're going to be having live odds and pretty soon Ticketmaster. What else are we looking for here?
Well, those are the next two big things. The live odds is a small thing, but a fun thing, for that handicapper who's kind of doing things at the last minute and nudging up against post time. As you're looking at the PPs of the race, within the PPs, where the morning line usually is just as a static number, will be flowing in the actual live odds at that moment. So, it's like having a tote board and the PPs kind of combined and in front of you. And the Ticketmaster feature is something based on my exotic betting book that allows people in playing multi-race wagers that if you rank horses as A's, B's, and C's, which is the way I go about playing multi-race wagers, and then making out multiple tickets, you can just make those designations on your own depending on who you like, and the formulator will spit back at you the tickets of all the permutations that you want to do, and you can tell the thing how much you want to spend or how deep you want to go, and again on the time saving front, some people don't like sitting there and trying to figure out the 9 different tickets. Well, this thing will just give them to you, so that'll be fun.
Did you? It strikes me that this is something a personal project. Are you tired of the Matrix and the red pen?
No, I'm still going to be there with my red flare writing all over everything. But a lot of us, just enjoy doing the old-fashioned grunt work. But I acknowledge that not everybody does.
All right, Steve. Let's switch to the Derby. I think when's the last time that in a Saturday column before, or Friday or Saturday column before the the week before the Derby, you picked your 1, 2, 3s.
Yeah. But, I think this is an unusual year. I think there's a lot of quality at the top of this group. Polar opposite from last year, where you had one good horse in Big Brown and a lot of question marks, and all those question marks, turned out to be answered in the negative. This year, you've got 4 or 5 really solid horses, each of whom could be the Derby favorite in a different year. So, my feeling about the race at this point, 6 days out, is that this isn't a year where you try to be a hero and come up with some goofy 40-1 shot to win the race. I feel strongly the winner's going to come out of one of those 4 or 5 favorites.
Steve, how do you handle the synthetic horses that are coming into the Kentucky Derby? For example, when I Want Revenge came into the Gotham Stakes, if you were just a class handicapper, he fit immediately, but some sheet players said that the horse had no chance because his synthetic numbers were way too low, and to a degree you have a similar situation this year with Pioneer of the Nile, perhaps 1 or 2 of the other synthetic horses. How do you handle that?
Well, I think there are a few different questions in there. The situation with an I Want Revenge, to my mind, that horse just flat out improved 5 to 10 lengths when he hit the dirt. And even the last race before coming east, Talamo said he was spinning his wheels in the stretch. I expected him to draw up and win by a pole, and he did absolutely nothing. I think this is just a horse who's much better on dirt than on synth. I think Papa Clem, who came east and won the Arkansas Derby, I think he improved on dirt too. Now, it's possible that Pioneer of the Nile will improve on the dirt, but, until we see it, I don't want to take a horse whose synthetic form puts him several lengths behind the other top contenders and who's not going to be much of a price. I mean, if he were going to be 30-1, I'd say, well, there's a chance. He's an empire maker. He may take to the dirt. But, I don't want him at 6, 7, 8-1 with a lot of guesswork involved.
Well, kind of a 2-part follow-up to that, Steve. Pioneer of the Nile strikes me as having a very, very similar running style to Colonel John, who was the big horse from the West last year. And that particular running style seems to fit the pro-ride synthetic surface, a little bit of the stalk and finish type of a style. But, the horse that you might be referring to, or an example might be, a Chocolate Candy is going to be probably 3 or 4 times the odds of Pioneer of the Nile, and he was a length or so behind him in the Santa Anita Derby. Is that the sort of thing that you're getting at?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I'm getting at. Pioneer of the Nile, on the one hand, you can say, gee, he beat I Want Revenge and Papa Clem. But there have been about 15 horses, most of them proven mediocrities, who have run within a length or 2 of Pioneer of the Nile. I mean, whatever you think of speed figures or how reliable they are in synthetic racing, I mean, just on old-fashioned handicapping, this isn't a horse who's been beating bad horses by 6 or 8 lengths. He's been beating bad horses by a length or 2, as well as beating some good horses by a length or 2.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big believer in that idea of horses only do what they have to and only run as fast as they have to. So far, to my mind, this horse just isn't fast enough to win the Kentucky Derby.
Steve, okay, given that the winner looms to come from the logicals, there are a lot of folks who are playing the exotics in that race, not necessarily the multiples as you will be playing. Who do you think is most likely in terms of odds to crack the exacto trifecta? I wouldn't really send you much below that, but who's a horse that you think, a horse or two you think might be able to outrun their odds?
Well, there usually are a few horses who just get overlooked, and what I've found to be a good way to come up with a live long shot is, look for a horse who just clearly didn't run his race last time out. I think especially with the Derby, people overly focus on a horse's last start. And a successful example is a horse like, Bluegrass Cat a couple of years ago when he ran second to Barbaro. This was a proven good horse who'd won the Remsen, and he ran poorly in the Bluegrass, coming into the race, and he went off at over 20-1, which made him a huge overlay. One example of a horse like that this year, might be a horse like Win Willie, who, he didn't run well in the Arkansas Derby. He got a big pace in front of him and still didn't close into it. But I'm very willing to just forgive a horse when he clearly doesn't run his race, whereas most people just look at the last start and go, he's no good.
Steve, the final question from us this morning, and we appreciate your time, is, one of the ultimate decisions people are going to have to make on Saturday, is the quarter crack with Quality Road. Now, obviously, there are several days yet to go. If we postulate that Jimmy Jerkins deems him fit and sound and into the race, how does that affect your opinion of Quality Road?
Well, it has to make you hesitate that the horse has had a problem this close to the race. That's never a good sign. And just because people say, I don't think it's a big deal, let's remember that's what the big brown people were saying before the Belmont last year. You just don't know until they have the full stress of a race on it. I think the mitigating factor is that in Jimmy Jerkins, you're talking about a very conservative, old-school horseman. He's not a guy who's suddenly trying to hustle clients and therefore wants a horse in the Derby just to have a horse in the Derby. I trust his judgment, and if he thinks that the horse is good enough to go, I'm not going to throw him out because of the quarter crack.
Okay, Steve, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you continued success, certainly at the betting windows. There's lots of folks who chime in or log in and check your online blog, and success with everything you're doing at Daily Racing Form to make it the best source of information you can. So thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, hope
take
we
care.
all crush the race.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
We're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll be talking with Phil Gregoire from Racing Flow. Stay with us. We're back again. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for staying with us. Before we go to our next guest, I'd like to remind you, while we are guest-laden today, and we are very grateful for that, we're obviously not taking as many phone calls, but we are online at viewermail.com, so if you want to drop us a line, do that, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We will go to the phone lines shortly after the 11 o'clock hour. Right now, we're joined by our friend Phil Gregoire, one of the Plod boys from Racing Flow. Phil, welcome back to the show.
Hey, good morning, Tom. Good morning, Nick. How are you guys today?
Good morning.
Listen, I just want you to know that, and we'll let everybody else know, last week the Plod boys sent us two major upgrades, and we both behaved like major from Catch-22, and we bet a turf horse, and both of your horses won at reasonable prices. $6 and $8 mutuals. So you'll take those, won't you, Phil?
Yes, we certainly will. I believe one of them was Coyote's Highest Call, who was a horse I actually wrote up in one of our, the weekly write-up we do once we get our zips and plods of the week. I did feature that horse in an article, and he came back and got a nice rail skimming ride and got the job done. So, yeah, we were happy with that.
All right, Phil, real quickly, just for terminology standpoint, re-explain for those who may not have heard you talk on our program before, the zip, the plod, and the bias that make up Racing Flow figures, and then we'll talk about the Derby.
Sure thing. We base our numbers on, we have two main terminology that we use. The first one is a zip. A zip is essentially a race that's going to have a positive number, most likely 100 or more. And all that indicates, Tom, is that the race was favorable to closers. So I don't want people to get intimidated by the word zip. All that means is that essentially the early part of the race was significantly faster relative to the final time than the last part of the race. Therefore, you get horses on the front end, they get tired, closers loop around, they look very impressive in winning. However, we tend to downgrade that type because they had things all in their favor. The plod is the reverse of that. A plod will be represented by a negative number for us, and again, typically anything 100 and higher becomes significant, and that's a race where the early part of the race tends to be slower relative to the final time than this later part of the race. Therefore, speed horses kind of get on the front, stay close to the pace. When the running starts at the end, they have energy to kick away. Closers, meanwhile, who are in their standard position, once they go to make their move, there's only so fast that they can go their last quarter mile or so they'll be accelerating, and ultimately on the racing form, we'll see no improvement or maybe a slight improvement. But maintaining their position is good enough. So we tend to upgrade closers in those events, and we downgrade pace. The other terminology that we have, of course, is just your simple bias. And again, in order to keep things linear, we have a positive number for a bias that favors closers. So when we see a closer bias racetrack come up, say 150 or more, plus that would mean that it's favoring closers on those days. The opposite would hold true for a bias that comes with a negative number, a negative 100 or negative 150. That's a bias that favors speed horses. And yesterday in the Daily Racing Form, Dave Litvin made mention of one of our bias figures regarding Dunkirk from Florida Derby Day. So he mentioned the fact that it was a racetrack that was carrying speed to, I believe, a minus 150, which is right on our line of being in what we call an important speed bias.
Phil, to follow up on that question, I'm looking over the sheet that you have on your website with the various prep races, and one thing that stands right out quickly is that both the Fountain of Youth and the Florida Derby appear to have favored, to one degree or another, the winner, Quality Road. And someone might look at this, let's say someone who isn't as familiar with your work as you are, and say, that must mean that Quality Road might be an overrated horse. What would you say?
I don't know if the word overrated is what I want to use, because he's certainly a terrific animal. I mean, any animal that's capable of rating behind reasonable splits and finishing reasonably well is a good horse. But he, in terms of the Kentucky Derby, yes, I would believe that he is going to be undervalued. I will be personally taking a stand against him in the race, assuming hopefully he gets to the race healthy. So yes, that is indeed the case. He's what we would call a double downgrade, Nick, because we've got downgrades. Both of his races, he was with the bias and with the flow of the race.
And let me just show our folks out there, this is as big as I can make it so you can see it. But
point out, please, that folks, you can download this sheet that we're looking at here at racingflow.com.
Right up here where my cursor is moving is the Fountain of Youth. Quality Road gets a minus 116 bias rating, which I guess you would probably call speed favoring, but not significantly biased. But the flow is minus 197, which is, I guess you'd have to say a slow pace. And down here, here's the Florida Derby down here, folks, minus 151 for the bias, which is just inside that significant. speed bias category, and the flow was 133. So, Phil, when I opened this up, those numbers jumped right off the page at me. And Quality Road, if people deem him healthy, he'd probably be no worse than the second choice in the betting.
Yeah, I would think you're right, Nick. And again, everything you did say about our figures is correct. So yes, we would have a double downgrade on him. The question in the race, as things seem to be developing here, is the question of pace. There doesn't appear to be all that much pace. If we go back over history, the last, what we call a plod from the Kentucky Derby, I believe, was 2002 with War Emblem.
Yep.
So that's been a while. Typically the Derby tends to be a zip, although things just on paper don't quite look that way. So it may be a little bit tough for some closers. But regardless of that scenario, we will be downgrading Quality Road, and we'll see what happens.
Well, let me ask you one final question about those two races in Quality Road, Phil,
Sure.
and then I'll shut up about it. As you mentioned, the loss of horses like the Pamplemousse and Old Fashioned does seem to indicate the pace will be slower than it would have been. So let's suppose someone is handicapping the Kentucky Derby after the final entries are drawn, and they decide that the pace probably is going to be moderate. Would that, to you, indicate that then it might shape up perfectly for a horse like Quality Road?
Well, that could very well happen. I mean, this is not a situation that is that rare, where we have horses, and what we do typically on a daily basis, personally and for our website, is we upgrade and downgrade horses. And from there, you want to go ahead and kind of take a look at the possible pace scenario of the way the race may shape up. So if we upgrade, or for instance, in this case, we downgrade a horse, and because he's what we call a double width plot or a double width bias, so he's being downgraded. Well, in the event that he catches that same kind of scenario, and he is again with the bias or with a pace scenario that suits him with a plod, then he's very likely to win again. And everyone will say, well, you were wrong. Well, ultimately, we may not be wrong. He caught another beneficial flow. So the third time, now he's going to come back again in the Preakness. We're going to have the same opinion. And at that sort of price, we're okay with taking a stance, having an opinion, downgrading a horse, and if things fall his way again, so be it. And ultimately what happens is people after two, you get one or two of these downgrades, then people start to change their opinion. All of a sudden, odds change significantly, and then they get a situation that isn't so conducive to their style, and that's when they get beat, and that's when the board tends to blow up.
Phil, let me use an analogy. That sounds to me like how a top-rated NCAA basketball team gets beat. It gets in the flow, gets in the rhythm, and then all of a sudden, the team itself is facing a different set of circumstances, and that becomes a bracket buster, if you will. So,
did you happen to lose a basketball bet recently?
No.
Okay.
Now, listen, I tell people I don't gamble. I just play horses. Now,
I have heard that speech before. Yes.
Yeah. That being said, I'd like you to comment about both the Gotham I Want Revenge Gotham and Wood Memorial figures. The Gotham was a big plod, minus 200, and he comes back in the Wood. We get a totally different race, certainly. So how do you evaluate those two races?
Well, we'll start off with the Gotham. Obviously, we have a downgrade on the winner. We had a downgrade on the horse that won yesterday out of the race, New York.
Mr. Fantasy.
Mr. Fantasy.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Fantasy. We had a downgrade on him. He did come back, and in a field that was cut down, lost a few horses, and it was kind of a strangely run race. He came back to win. We'll see what kind of number that came back, and whether he had things in his favor or not. So we downgraded I Want Revenge coming out of the Gotham. We actually had another upgrade in the race who didn't run particularly well, the Shug McGahee horse,
Right.
who came back in the Wood and
Imperial Council.
Yeah, really came up empty. As far as the Wood Memorial goes, I mean, again, if you're looking at the numbers, it is essentially as par as it can be. So basically, it was even for all types of horses. Again, visually impressive. I mean, anyone who says otherwise might be watching a different tape. So very impressive. Everything the horse did, everything the jockey did. Questions about who we beat certainly remain
Yep.
for everybody. And I mean, the versatility is good. You know, I mean, I could get into some basic concepts of handicapping, but that's probably not what I'm here for. So, from a Racing Flow perspective, we're going to just obviously call the Wood Memorial neutral for him and anybody else who may be coming out of it. I believe there's one, Westside Bernie, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is the other horse. So you look at this. You look at some of the horses that he faced. Obviously, that sort of trip next Saturday is not going to work out as well.
Right.
For either the horse or the jockey, it's going to be. It's very cool to stay calm and collected when you're headed to the Derby, regardless, as it is to when you're actually in the Derby. So we'll see. Very exciting horse. I mean, if you want my personal opinion, I think he throws a clunker on Derby Day and wins the Preakness by 10 lengths.
Very interesting.
That's kind of my personal opinion. And
We take opinions here,
yeah, I understand that. Actually, the whole game is based on opinions, I believe.
All right, now this is extremely important. I know you guys have talked about the success you felt that your figures give you at the windows on poly and synthetic surfaces. And so I guess my question, how have you guys interpreted the move from synthetic of any form or synthetic of particular form? For example, Pioneer the Novel, coming from the Pro Ride, trying dirt. Help.
Yeah, it's a tough one. We don't have, what are we, 5 years into this thing?
Yeah.
I believe since Turfway first went to the synthetic. So we don't have a lot of data at this point on it. I can say personally, I thought I Want Revenge would make a huge improvement on the dirt just based on the bloodline. I happened to be right that day. But, as far as not I Want Revenge.
Pioneer.
As far as Pioneer of the Nile goes, I mean, the breeding certainly says dirt. And again, these are easy cases for us, Tom, because we're talking about short-priced horses. And it's just really not the way we play the game, or at least not the way, my partner and I play the game. And certainly not in the Derby. So, I would say anybody who's on the bubble and plays this game every day or plays this game every weekend and the Derby comes along and you're not sure about a horse that's going to be the second choice in a field of 20, my inclination would be to say, he won't handle it. I have no other basis to go on. I'm not a breeding expert. I'm not the trainer. So, everything else is done. He looks good, but it's just kind of a different world.
Well, that being said, because Captain Candyman Chocolate Candy is the next horse. Now he's not going to be the favorite.
Correct. That's correct. So there we have a situation where we've talked in the past before, Tom. It's called, what I call the tandem rule.
Yeah.
I think you guys call it the uncoupled entry type of thing. But tandem rule. Obviously, you're going to have one of them's going to be 4 or 5 to 1, whatever he may be, and then Captain Candyman's going to be an enormous price probably relative.
Yeah.
So same situation. If you're looking for prices on the Derby, and that's probably what you should be doing, just like any other race, then that may be a play. It's funny. I was looking back. If you look at last Sunday at Keeneland, they ran the Ben Alley.
Yeah.
And there were 3 horses that were in the Ben Alley who, last year or the year before ran in the Kentucky Derby. The first was Adriano, who won the Lane's End in 2008, and then went from the Lane's End right to Kentucky, and he finished 19th by, I believe, 50 lengths. Dominican, who was the Bluegrass winner in 07 over Street Sense, he went to the Derby and finished 11th. And Mamba, who was the Bluegrass winner last year, went to the Derby, and I believe he got edged out by Adriano and finished 20th. Mm-hmm. So, there certainly is some history relative to the Bluegrass and the move to Churchill.
Okay.
At least based on those those few very small sample size. But and I guess that's my lead into general quarters.
Okay.
Certainly a great story. He looked very, very impressive winning the Bluegrass. They always do. He looked strong. His stride was fantastic. But again, it's probably going to be a fair price, but personally not a horse that I'd be considering.
Well, Phil, that's one of the things that makes this Derby so intriguing, is because you have a handful of these question mark horses, and some of them are in the hands of people, that have just proven over time that they can win horse races. Despite the odds, you got Pioneer in the Nile in the hands of Baffert. Chocolate Candy, Jerry Hollendorfer probably should be in the Hall of Fame already. And then you got Bill Mott's horse, Hold Me Back. So, Mott isn't traditionally a Kentucky Derby type trainer, but I don't think anybody out there would say that he can't get a horse ready and win the Kentucky Derby. So this is going to be a fascinating horse race.
Yeah, it should be a fascinating race. I mean, again, with the pace scenario kind of shaping up the way it is. I mean, we haven't even talked about Papa Clem.
Yep.
Who certainly figures to be forwardly placed. In his Arkansas Derby, we'll look real quick. Is again essentially a neutral race for us, but he showed an impressive little bit of versatility. I mean, I remember sitting there with my partner Jake Jacobs and a couple other people thinking that the scenario would be kind of the opposite of what it was, where Old Fashioned would be trying to take back, and Papa Clem would probably be the lone speed. Well, the race Arkansas Derby was run entirely opposite of that, and Papa Clem showed a new dimension. So, he's transferred clearly to the California group. He's transferred his wax or synthetic form twice fairly well, and once on a sloppy track and once on dirt. So, I mean, we've got two cases coming out of California, and they both transferred fairly well.
Okay.
So it should be interesting. I'm kind of with, personally, I believe that Dunkirk, again, given the pace scenario as being fair, he's the horse that gets the major upgrade for me out of the Florida Derby, having run against the bias and against the plod. Mm-hmm. There are those that take the opinion that he looked this horse in the eye, might have put a head past him, and then Quality Road put him away. Well, his work had been done. I mean, doing what he did to try to close into and get into that position, at that point, that is the essence of what a plot is. I mean, a plot is when you're working so hard to gain ground, you gain that ground, you make a huge run for 3/8 of a mile or a half a mile, and then the horse that's had everything his own ways has more energy left and spurts away. And I think that's visually what we saw. I'm never a Dunkirk fan until after the Florida Derby. So,
Okay, Phil, we want to thank you once again for taking the time. Wish you and Jake continued success, and encourage our audience, members of our audience, to log on to racingflow.com and find out what it's all about. You're adding a new feature, I hear.
what did you hear?
I thought I read at the site something new in this spot.
Well, we do. I've just been. Yeah, the Plot Boy bonus play was just a lot of work for me.
Okay.
So the numbers were good. I kind of set my sights on how many I would actually do.
Okay.
We went through a little bit of a losing streak, and it is a lot of work. So what we've done, I'm just basically going to use that kind of as a forum for anything that kind of comes to mind.
Okay, great.
And then, of course, we have our new report that's out there.
Yep.
There's a possibility for viewers, if you want to take a look during the week, that we may be featuring something for the Kentucky Derby Day card. We have yet to decide how we're going to handle that. And, we might even have some flat-out opinion on the Derby itself once we get everything lined up.
Well, I'll be checking on the site and talking to both of you.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great, Tom. Thanks a lot for having Racing Flow on, Nick and Tom. Appreciate it.
All right, be well.
Take
Good
care.
luck. Bye-bye.
Okay, we're going to take our next break, and then we're going to get Carrie Photius. Did you want to say anything to me before we go?
Well, the only thing I would say is, if Phil's still listening out there in Cyberland, he'd better be careful if he likes Dunkirk.
Okay.
If you know what that could possibly mean.
Yes, it's got to have something connected to you.
Well, I might like him too, so that could be a problem.
Okay, we'll be right back with Carrie Photius. Stay with us. buggy. Are we back?
We're back.
We're back. Carrie Photius, are you there?
I'm here. I'm here. I'm in Carbon County, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, listen, did you get yourself a buggy, a beard, and a straw hat yet, or what?
What's up, guys?
Where's Carbon County, Gary?
That's near the Poconos, kind of. A little,
okay.
My wife's from a little town up around here called Palmerton, and
No sweetheart pubs,
we're
no.
in Lehighton right now, not too far from Stroudsburg. That.
So you're almost in Rolling Rock country.
There you go, Latrobe.
Okay. All right, Carrie, two things. First of all, it's Triple Crown time, and it's Triple Crown Teleclinic time. So talk about that first, please, and then we'll talk about horses.
Yeah, well, as usual, we're doing our Triple Crown teleclinics. We do them on the Friday night before each of the Triple Crown day races. So this year it'll be on Friday, May 1st, Friday, May 15th, Friday, June 5th from 9:30 to 11:30 Eastern. John Preachy and I will go over all the races, give people some insights, our proprietary odds line on all the races. We also make a recording of the thing, so if you can't stay up that late, you can wake up in the morning and have it all there for you. So it's a lot of fun. Last year we had 7 winners on top. Of course, I didn't bet any of them because they weren't any value. But so I don't know what that means. 7 top winners, and I didn't bet any of them. But I still had a good day with some other overlays on the card. So we're all about value at Equiform. Although we pick some winners along the way too. So you can, call us toll free 866-374-3676 or go to our website. www.equiform.com, and click on the links there. You'll see all the details, and we'd love to have any of your listeners join us. I think they'd enjoy it.
All right, Carrie, here's my first question. From as a figure maker and from a figure standpoint, my first question is, what do your figures tell you about what a horse has to be able to run in order to be competitive in a Derby for you? And which of the horses that you're looking at right now seem to be the horses have done that for you from a figure standpoint?
Yeah, the only horses I would have to say that have shown the ability to to look like they're going to run a number it takes to win the Derby are I Want Revenge, Quality Road, and Dunkirk. Frisian Fire is kind of a tough read in that, he hasn't raced in 7 weeks, so if he'd had a race in between, he might have thrown up a big number there somewhere. He's developing nicely. Pioneer of the Nile is also a tough read because he's been running pretty much exclusively on synthetic surfaces, the Pro Ride and, other synthetic surfaces. Those tracks, especially this Pro Ride and the routes at Santa Anita, I've clocked them this year. The routes tend to run more like turf races than dirt races, so if the pace isn't real quick or even average, you're not going to run a big final number. So he's a tricky read to me, Pioneer of the Nile. But I think, what I'm saying here is no big surprise. I think those are everybody's kind of top 5 right now. So, but the horses that have really run the big numbers are Quality Road, I Want Revenge, and to a lesser extent Dunkirk, because he's only done it once and he's off a big top. But anyways, those just on raw numbers, those are the fastest 3 horses.
So let me ask you again, then from a figure standpoint, I know you play the California tracks.
Right.
And so do you see a reasonable or an understandable depression in figures, in your figures, or a compression of figures for horses who go from dirt to synthetics or dirt to Pro Ride, and then a jump up, if you will?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, on balance, you do see that a little, because I think the numbers you run on some of these synthetic surfaces are so much a function of the pace, and so if you don't get a good pace up front, you're just not going to run that good final number. So what I tend to look at on these synthetic surfaces, which I think speaks well for Pioneer of the Nile, is I like to treat it like somewhere between a dirt race and a turf race, and especially on the Santa Anita surface, I like to look at it, their finishing ability, what kind of a spread, as we say in the Equiform numbers, they ran coming home, and that I think is more indicative of the condition they're in than just looking at the raw final number. And that's the age we're in now, with all these different synthetic surfaces. I mean, some people don't like it, because it complicates things. But I think, if you're willing to do the work and really find out what type of running styles win on these different surfaces, you can actually turn it into an advantage.
Kerry, one last thing on the synthetics,
Yeah.
and then I'll get off of it. I was doing some track bias or profile figures for this past Santa Anita meet, and in compiling the results every day, I kind of had the anecdotal impression that there were two types of winners on that track, and that was either they went wire to wire or a horse came from the back half of the pack. That the pace was either slow and a horse went all the way because the pace was so slow, or as you pointed out, the finishing time is most important. And again, the races were pretty much run like turf races with the notation that when the pace was slow, you had a lot of wire winners.
Exactly. No, I think I would pretty much agree with that, Nick. I think when horses got out there, and nobody put any pressure on them, they could go wire to wire. But if you had your average mix of horses in there, some speed, some stalkers, some closers, it just, especially in the routes, I noticed it. I don't know what you saw, but it just seemed like they would go, they'd go up. Normally in California,
Right.
on the old surface, you'd go 46 and change in a route. Now they were going 48 change, 49,
Right.
and
Yep.
the closers would still get there. So that to me, when I started seeing that over and over and over again, it really, said, hey, I've got to start from a condition standpoint. I can't just focus on the final numbers. I got to look at like the come home times with these horses.
Condition. Are you saying that that might be a positive for Pioneer of the Nile coming to the Derby? Listen, and we're not talking price right now.
Right.
We're just talking.
Well, I think it's going to depend, on how the race unfolds. I mean, what's interesting to me about the Derby this year is I had to do a piece for Horse Player magazine.
Right.
First, they gave me a choice. Hey, list your top 3 horses. I listed Quality Road, Beethoven, and somebody else I forget. And Quality Road, somebody else took him. Beethoven, I had him, and he got hurt, so I got left with one of the Saeed bin, one of the Godolphin horses, who's Regal Ransom. And as I did some more research on him, I realized this horse ran a bang-up race first time out at Saratoga, just like his granddaddy did, Red Ransom. And, he ran as good a race first time out as Quality Road did a few months later. So, this horse has some talent. My point being, though, that you look at, the Pamplemousse is gone. Old Fashioned is gone. Quality Road, who's got good tactical speed's a question mark. I start looking at this race. I'm telling you, this race might be there for the taking on the front end. There's just not a heck of a lot of speed in this race. And, if you get something like 25, 30 to 1 on a Regal Ransom or something, especially if Quality Road acts up and doesn't make the race, I'd give him a long look. So I think it's going to be, in terms of, is it an advantage, a disadvantage? In the end, it comes down to how does the horse like the track. And I think, from what I read in the press, it's like Pioneer of the Nile took pretty well to the Churchill surface, even though it was an off track. So you just never know till they run the race. That's what makes it. That's what makes it a gamble, so to speak.
Do you have any opinion on Sheikh Mo's other horse, Desert Party?
Yeah. I really think, even though a lot of his other horses have come here, going way back with Worldly Manor, which was, I think, the first one. A lot of them have been hyped. This year, it strikes me that they're playing very low key with these horses. And I got to tell you something, with the pace scenario with Regal Ransom. And just the way Desert Party, was finishing up in those races in Dubai, which, by the way, has a surface. They've tried to model it kind of like the Churchill surface. So, because that's their main goal is to win the Derby. So I think kind of they slipped under the radar screen this year. And I think either of those horses, might be definitely worth uses in the gimmicks.
Let me ask you, before I give it back to Nick Carey.
Yeah.
Here's a quick question. In the next 10 years, what's your line on Sheikh Mo winning a Derby?
He's going to win it. He's going to, you know why he's going to win it? Because he's kind of come this far now with I'm going to do it my way, and it might take him. He might have been able to do it sooner. He's kind of a stubborn guy, I guess. But when you got that kind of money, I guess you can afford to be stubborn. But I think he's going to do it. I got a weird feeling he might even do it this year because once you get past Quality Road, I Want Revenge, and Dunkirk. None of these horses have really shown, like that kind of ability that, at this point, that they're going to be some kind of a, super horse.
Well, that says to me that the Shakes horses will be at least underneath on your ticket.
Oh, definitely.
Okay,
Definitely.
Carrie, you have a great time in Pennsylvania. You keep us posted. Good luck with your teleclinics, and say hello to John.
Always good talking to you
Okay,
guys.
thanks
and,
so much.
We'll talk to you soon. Have
Yep.
a good
Take
one.
care, Kerry.
All right.
Okay, last commercial break. We're going to get Jim Mazur. We'll talk briefly with Jim Mazur, and then we'll open up the phone line. So now's your chance. We want to know what you think about the Derby. And if you have any strong opinions on the horses on today's card at Aqueduct, because folks been beating up on us for quite some time, so we'll see what's going to happen. 370-1315 is the number when we finish up with Jim Mazur. So we'll be back. Stay with us. Jim Mazur, welcome back to the program.
How are you guys?
Listen, we're terrific, and it's almost like Florida where we are. How is it where you are?
Actually, it's cold and rainy and foggy and
Good.
Jim, that means if our colleague Mike Veach is listening,
He's happy.
he would recommend that you take a drive out into the country, find the nearest lake, and jump in for a dip.
Okay, here's what we want, Jim. Plain and simple. We want to know what you told these Canadians about the Derby. We don't want you to leave anything out.
I told them to hope for a currency switch this week so that we can make more money and bet more.
You're too much. All right, I'm going to be listen, you're going to like this one. When we confirmed that you were going to be with us, as well as some other folks, we put it up on the website, and I got a question for you, an electronic question.
Sure.
Guy doesn't want to know what you think about the top three. He wants to know what you think about Freezing Fire, Chocolate Candy, Musket Man, and Regal Ransom, and Win Willie, the second-tier horses.
The second-tier horses. Okay, well, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Of those four, let's see, Freezing Fire.
Freezing Fire, Chalk Candy, Musket Man, Regal Ransom, and Win Willie.
Okay. I think of the two, Parisian Fire is the one that intrigues me the most.
Mm-hmm.
Basically because Larry Jones has finished second twice in the last 2 years, and he seems to know what to do. And even though I don't like the layoff since the Louisiana Derby, I think this horse has a good shot to hit the board. I really do, and he's going to be pretty close to the pace. Hopefully, he'll get a decent position. He's been favored or second favored in almost every start of his career, and I think you're probably looking at at least 15-1 on Derby Day. I just don't know if he's tight enough to win. He's got that 104 buyer that he ran, which is almost par for the race, which is 105. It was done on the slop, but, what are you going to do? I mean, it is what it is. But I certainly like the connections, and I have him high on my list. Regal Ransom would be the next one, but I would put him together with Desert Party because they're both Godolphins. And 1 year these guys are going to come through and win. They're going to do it, and you're going to do it at a price. So you want to find the horse that's totally ignored, and Regal Ransom will be the longer part of the uncoupled entry, I'm almost sure. And last time or the last 3 times out, they've raced against each other. It was them and against about 6 camels. So we have no clue what they have under the hood. We get these Racing Post ratings, which I consulted Dr. Vinny Boombatz, and we came up with a 10-tick haircut. So that gets Regal Ransom around a 102, in unscientific terms, and Desert Party in the same boat. So I think they're bred, both of them, to go 1.25 miles. I think they're quality horses. I think Regal Ransom's going to go out in the lead and make things honest. And sometimes they don't stop on the front end. Like I think we had that in the Belmont last year.
Yeah.
With
Jim,
the Zito, the other Zito getting in front, and
Goodbye.
the Terra, and that was it. And Knock Nakal, you never heard from him, and that was it. So those two, I think, are up there. I'm going to use them on, some ancillary pick 3 and pick 4 tickets because 1 year they're going to come through, and this could be the year. There's no world beaters out there this year. I don't think.
Well, Jim, let me just stick in before you go on with the other horses that the emailer mentioned. That Hard Spun came into the Derby off a 6-week layoff,
Right.
so I'm not necessarily sure that extra 7 days, means that Freeze and Fire can't run well enough to crack the top 3.
Absolutely right.
And the thing about the 2 Godolphin horses is, I'm sure you've observed this, I know Tom has, often when 2 horses come out of the same race and they finish 1-2 or 1-3, the betting public, for some reason, always focuses on the horse that got beaten, and turns out to be the shorter price, and the horse that actually won the race last time will sometimes go off in an overlay price because people think, well, there was an excuse, so he's going to get beaten today. Maybe that won't happen in the Derby either.
Well, the excuse that day, from what I understand from my friends over in Dubois, which is none, was that there was a speed bias. No, that's what everybody was saying, is there was a speed bias that day, and that's why Regal Ransom won. But I totally agree with you. It fits right in with my last out winner ignored. And this horse, it could be 30-40-1.
Could be.
Yeah, absolutely. But getting back to Frisian Fire, I didn't like the fact that he hasn't beaten anybody. So I went back and looked at Hard Spun and 8 Bells, and Hard Spun didn't beat anybody either coming up to this. He didn't beat anybody at Turfway, and he didn't beat anybody in Louisiana. So I like Frisian Fire. I think he is a definite use on the ticket. Chocolate Candy.
Right.
That's the Hollendorfer.
Yep.
Never seen dirt. I don't know. Nothing wrong with him. I just, the trouble you have in the Derby, from my perspective, is that if you look at past performances of the winners, almost all of them, except for Giacomo, have popped one good number. Okay? But then we run into this situation, well, you know what? What about these California horses that never get a chance to run anything other than the pro ride? And between you and me, with all due respect to Andy Beyer, I don't think the buyers there are right. I just think that they're okay on that circuit comparing horses between, Hollywood and Santa Anita, but they just don't seem to jive when the horse moves off that surface and then goes to the East Coast. I mean, we've seen a bunch of horses improve the last 2 years. I mean, there was a horse that came out and won the Arkansas Derby last year. You had, I want revenge this year. Even the Studi horse, jumped up a little bit when he came out of there, Papa Clem. So I think you have to bake in the fact that there's going to be some improvement when they get to the dirt, if there's dirt breeding. So for that matter, it's interesting because Chocolate Candy and Pioneer of the Nile, and who's the other one that ran third that day? Mr. Hot Stuff. You know, they're all coming out of the same race. They're all pretty close to each other. You know, Pioneer of the Nile is probably going to be the wise guy horse in the field, especially if Quality Road has, the quality, the quarter crack. So he's probably, Pioneer of the Nile is going to move up a slot or two on the odds board, and it's Baffert and all that. But why not play the horses that finish behind them that are going to be 30, 40 to 1?
Jim, the only thing that I know about Chocolate Candy for sure is that if there was a futures market in thoroughbred sires, I'd buy Candy Ride. I think this horse is going to be a tremendous producer. He had a horse first time on the turf at Aqueduct yesterday that that won and did it pretty stylishly.
Really?
I think he's going to be a tremendous sire.
Yeah, he's brandy new, so we don't know.
Of multi-surface. I think this horse is going to produce winners on anything, including Broken Glass, if they run over that.
Right. We don't get much from the workout, except for the fact that he worked him a mile, which was pretty interesting.
I love those.
I would
mile
imagine we might see one more. I don't know if we're going to see one more from him. But that's usually a good barometer also, and I haven't seen anybody blazing their way through Churchill so far. Even the Baffert, Pioneer of the Nile, I would have expected a 58 or a 59 and change, and all we got was a minute and change.
That's slow for Baffert.
It is, and yet everybody was going gaga over, Mike Welsh and all those guys say how well he handled the track, this and that, and maybe that's so, and that's good. But over the pro ride, he was working 46-1 and 111-2, 58-4. I would have expected a crank, a Baffert crank, but maybe he's throwing us a curveball.
Jim, you mentioned Quality Road. I want you to tell me, do you like horses with quarter cracks?
No, and especially when they reoccur or come into another hoof.
Yeah.
No, I think you got to probably play against him. If he's healthy, he probably wins the race. Probably the most talented and fastest of the bunch. But I think you're going to have to probably play against him at this point.
Yeah, and he's still going to have to fend off or get by at least Regal Ransom. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. He's not going to have it on his own in the front end, and he's going to have to work hard up there. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a blistering pace. And one of the things we talked about at the seminar yesterday was the history of what kind of running style wins this race based on pace scenarios. And it's pretty logical stuff that when they go faster early, they come from the back. Like 22 or 1 or faster. There's only been 4 editions where the first quarter has gone 22 or 1 or faster in like the last 15 years, and all 4 were deep rally winners. But that's probably not what you're going to see. You're probably going to see a 23 and change or something like that. And the real telltale sign would be how fast they go to the 3 quarters. If it's 110 or less, it's going to be from the clouds. But that's probably not going to happen as well. It's probably going to be 111 and change or slower. And if that happens, you either get a wire winner. We've had 2 of those, 4 stalkers, and 1 rally. So I don't see a lot of front-end burners in here. They've all defected.
Yeah.
And as a result, you might see a controlled pace set by Regal Ransom, and that again might set up the possibility that he just keeps going, and doesn't stop. How funny would that be?
All right. Listen, one last thing, Jim. You talked about pick 3s, pick 4s. We mentioned it the last time you were here. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention it again. You do have available the Kentucky Derby undercard book, which what I always say when given the opportunity, that mile race on the turf, the profile fits.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the whole thing and it's even more important, I think, on Preakness and Belmont Day, when sometimes the races, the feature races, can come up a little bit chalky. But the undercard races, the stakes races, if they can fill them and give you fields of 10 or 12, I mean, that can make the whole day. I mean, if you can, if you're coming down to all you can get past is I Want Revenge in Dunkirk, and that's it. then that's great. That's what you go with, and then you start filling in the front end of the pick 3 and 4 and trying to find some fuzzies. And there's always one or two.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go on record saying there will be one ticket of mine that will have all punched in the Humana Distaff, because that is the one that knocks me out every single year. I mean, I couldn't hit Kangaroo, I couldn't hit Hysterical Lady, Pussycat Doll, My Trusty Cat. I did catch Mayo on the side and then forgot to put in Smarty Jones.
No.
Don't ask me about that one.
No, I won't ask you about that one. We love hearing those tales. Jimmy, we really appreciate your joining us today. We want to have a safe trip back home. How's your boy? How's that injury?
He's okay. He's okay.
Yeah. How old is he?
He's 13. He's 13. He's he hurt himself in a pregame warm-up. Didn't even see a minute.
Yeah.
So the bookmakers in Vegas were going crazy because the line was 12 on the youth game, and that was it. So, no.
Allow me this moment. The first page of Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird references. Or actually, it says this sentence. So when my brother Jem's fears of not being able to play football were finally assuaged, kid breaks his arm, okay? And you find out in chapter 27 how he broke his arm. But the point is, tell him to read that first page, because this too shall pass.
That's true, absolutely. Good talking to you guys. I don't know where you're going to be for the Derby, but enjoy the day, and
you too.
We'll reconnoiter maybe before the Preakness.
Absolutely.
We'll figure out what went right and what went wrong.
Absolutely.
Good luck, Jim.
You too, guys.
Okay.
Take care.
Be careful. All right. Let's see. We got about 7.5 minutes here. We can take a couple of phone calls now. Excuse me.
Let me just toss out
One
there.
second. There they are. 370-1315, 1-888-253-8562. Viewer mail at capitalotb.com. What would you like to point out?
Well, we've had this conversation before in previous years. I think people vastly underrate the power of early speed in the Kentucky Derby. If you go back to Spend a Buck, which I believe was 85, we've had 25 derbies since then, counting that one, and there have been 4 wire-to-wire winners. Winning Colors, Go for Gin, Spend a Buck, and War Emblem. And Funny Side wasn't far off the lead either.
Right.
But we'll take 4 out of 25, and that's, what, 14, 15%? So that's would be one wire winner in a field of 7. If you had random, that's 1 out of 7. And normally the Derby field is 14 to 20. I think speed is very dangerous in the Derby. And if the pace is, if any more of the speed, if Quality Road comes out, the horses like Dunkirk, who I happen to like, they're going to be up against it.
All right, we got a couple of phone calls. We want to get some of this in. Let's go to Colony.
Tom in Colony. Tom, good morning.
How you doing, guys?
Terrific.
Hey, I want to do some wagering prep this week, and I was curious as to whether they would have dollar triple superfectas and dollar exacta wheels or not.
I can't tell you.
Tom, I'm not. I think they have dollar supers. Churchill Downs is very funny, because if they're the ones that determine what other outlets like Capital OTB can take, and they have 10-cent superfectas basically every day of their meet, other than the Derby, and I think last year they didn't have them on Oaks Day either. So it's hard to predict, what I would assume there'll be dollar wagers, but I do know that the year that Ashado won the Kentucky Oaks, my wife tried to make an Ashado all, in the Derby, a daily double for $1, and she couldn't because Churchill wouldn't take it. So, I'm not sure if there's been any changes this year.
Okay, one other follow-up. In terms of the Oaks Derby pick, is there any way of getting odds on those 2 horses, if I'm paying attention to OTB at all?
You're talking about the double probables?
Right.
I think you'll get that. I think you'll get that screen.
Okay.
I think you'll get that screen.
It's usually available, Tom.
Yeah.
You kind of have to be watching, or if
on
I
the
really
internet.
want to get something off the network, what I do is I put a tape in and let it run, and that way I can check it when, in case I look away or get a drink or go to the bathroom or something.
Okay, thanks, guys.
All right, let's
luck.
go to Plattsburgh. Talk to Dan.
Dan in Plattsburgh. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning.
Hi, Dan.
Hi. I think while you guys were off for Palm Sunday and Easter, I heard something about Harvey Pack retiring.
Yes.
Correct.
I did. Oh, okay. And Tom, I understand you're a good friend of Andy Serling.
Well, we're better friends. Excuse me, I'm getting some feedback. Yeah, I'd say that. We spent a little bit more time than we have in the past at Saratoga, and I've had both email and phone conversation with Andy on several occasions, and Andy is going to be doing a seminar with us here at Capital Off Track on May 31st. He'll have a bankroll, and he'll be doing a wagering seminar from I think starting at about 11 o'clock, and then he'll spend the day at the Teletheater with folks constructing tickets. So, yeah, I like to think that I'm a friend of Andy's, and he's a friend of ours. He's been very good to the show. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Well, anyway, on one of his shows there, he couldn't remember who came up with the when they were in the Mother Goose. It was during the first Iraqi War, and then the mother of all gooses. Anyway, it was Leroy Jolly.
Okay.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys.
Okay.
Take care, Dan.
Let's go to Saratoga, talk to Bob.
Bob in Saratoga. Bob, good morning.
Good morning.
We've been waiting for this call, so let's have it.
Well, first of all, the most immediate thing is Dunkirk to me is a total toss.
Okay.
Now I really like him, Bob.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I
And
just
the
drew a
second-
line through him.
The second thing, Nick, is when you're listening to important information, never, and I repeat, never, go to the bathroom. It's not polite.
Okay.
I really am looking at 3 horses or 4 horses, Parisian Fire,
Yeah.
because historically, in route races over the past 6 years, Larry Jones has been amazing off 8-week or less layoff.
Okay, next, because we're running out of time.
Okay, the 2 Dubai horses, I think they have
Yep.
the potential to go all the way. Captain Candyman
He's done
and
it.
Chocolate Candy.
The candy exacta, huh?
The Candy Exacta for all of the people. And by the way, I did not know that Harvey had retired. And last year, Andy, the last day of the seminar at Ciro's, made a firm statement that if Harvey retired, he wouldn't do that seminar anymore.
Well, he's not. Okay, and here's what's happened. What has happened, and it has been released in the notification of Harvey Pack's retirement. Number one, Daily Racing Form is moving that seminar to the Carousel. So it is no longer to be held at Ciro's. There is some, I don't know if anything is going to take place at Ciro's. There's some rumor that they may want to do something. But what they're doing is they're expanding Talking Horses from 30 minutes to, I think, 45 minutes. And then Andy and 2 others, I do believe, will run the similar seminar from the Naira Carousel.
As long as he brings the dunce cap with him, I'll be a viewer.
I don't think it's far from him. Okay.
Take
Thanks.
care, Bob.
Thanks,
Good
Bob.
luck.
Let's go to Schenectady.
Steve in Schenectady is next. Steve, good morning. Hello, Steve.
Steve, you there?
Yes, I was wondering if that Mr. X, who does
Yeah.
thing for the Derby, if he covered anything for this year.
I will tell you that I'm glad you brought it up because I was going through my emails. Last we heard, Mr. X was out of town.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything
And we
yet.
haven't heard anything, but I'm sure that he's probably watching and listening. And if we get it shortly, we'll let you know what he has to say. But he'll be pleased to know that people are asking. Thanks for asking. Let's go to last caller, Debbie.
Debbie in Clifton Park. Debbie, thanks for calling.
Hi, this is Steve in Saratoga. I got cut off.
Okay, go ahead,
okay,
Steve.
Steve, you there? Steve?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead. What do you got?
Hey, guys, let me ask you a question. If on, like, the Thorograph sheets or the Ragusan sheets, if a horse runs second by, say, a half a length or a length, that horse's number can virtually be better than the winner because of the trip, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. But I'm looking at the profile in a daily racing form on my computer, okay? Dunkirk ran second in the Florida Derby, came back with a 108 speed figure,
Yep.
okay? The winner, Quality Road, right?
Yep.
Came back with a 103. That's not possible, is it?
I don't think that's
I don't
right,
think
Steve. I think Quality Road got a higher figure.
111.
Yeah, so
I'm looking at it on the computer under let's see, profiles here, and it says that the Florida Derby a 103.
Well, I'm looking at past performances that I downloaded today. Quality Road's got a 111, and
Dunkirk a 108.
Dunkirk 108.
And
okay.
anybody, you can get free past performances right now on the Daily Racing Form website. If you go to their Triple Crown page, they're there if you want them.
All right. Thanks for the call. We got to go. We're heading to the Teletheater for our live bankroll completion, if you will. We want to thank our guests for joining us. We hope you found it useful and informative. Bottom line, Nikki, is that most folks think that there's a narrow group from which the winner should come, and lots bad has to happen to the logicals for an illogical or semi-logical to jump up.
That's logical.
That's logical. We'll see how it plays out. If you have any questions or comments, please write us. There it is, TrackFacts, P.O. Box 554. You can email us. You get me at trackfacts@nicap.roadrunner.com. Get the Nixter or me at trackfacts@gmail.com. Have a great day. I want to thank Peter and Kirk downstairs for their help. Next week, all you, no guests, just your comments on a post-Derby requiem, post-mortem. We'll be back next week. Have a great week.
If you have any comments or suggestions, please write to the General Manager at the OTB Television Network, 510 Smith Street, Schenectady, New York, 12305.
This is the OTB Network.
Tom Gallo talks about racing partnerships.
It allows you to have an ownership interest in an athlete, in a professional athlete that doesn't renegotiate his contract, doesn't become a free agent. We're talking about horses. We're talking about the beauty and the athleticism of these wonderful athletes. I want to bring more people into this. I'm saying to myself, listen, you got to try this. You got to try it. This is great. This is fantastic.
Join Saratoga's original racing partnership. Visit us online at Parting Glass Racing.